What's going on, guys? Your boy Amazing. We're back with another video, and in today's video, guys, me doing the complete Nidhoggr guide for you guys so that you're able to start clearing Nidhoggr, getting your materials so you can start making all the crazy holy relics in Grand Cross. So with the release of Margaret coming out on Global, I wanted to actually make a complete guide here for you guys so that you're able to actually clear through all three of the floors consistently, and so that you're able to start collecting all these Nidhoggr materials for these holy relics you want to be making. So with that out of the way, guys, before we actually hop into the video though, make sure to subscribe to your boy Amazing. We are on the road to the 40,000 subscribers. I would appreciate if you guys like this video, because this is, I'm going to be putting a lot of effort into this one in terms of, making graphics and just, explaining everything as much as I can. So hopefully you guys like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, all that good stuff. With that out of the way, guys, let's hop in and let's discuss the team comps that you want to be running on Nidhoggr. Alright, guys, so here is the guide I made covering the teams that you want to be running on Nidhoggr. It pretty much goes over all the best teams that I would actually recommend and the meta comps that you want to be running for this demonic beast. So as you guys can see on the notes section, it says holy relics for characters that do, and then red Tarmiel link for the character that should have the red Tarmiel link. But these are pretty much the teams. We'll go from the top left to the bottom right. So we got a Goddess Mael team, we have the Ragnarok Skadi team, we have the Goddess Tarmiel team, the Ragnarok Matrona team, we have the Sins Miguelda team, and then the Ragnarok tier team. These are the only teams that I would say are the main meta teams that you're going to be running on Nidhoggr, right? These are the ones that you should be building for if you have the characters for, and you're going to want to be running these teams because you're able to clear all three floors, not super consistently, but I'd say very well every single week. Give or take like 1 or 2 tries with a lot of these teams. With the Margaret teams, probably 1 or 2 depending on your RNG as well. But these are going to be the teams that I recommend personally for you guys when clearing. And then in the notes section, as you guys can see, all characters that have holy relics are being used for this guide. So characters like Skadi or characters like Matrona, they have holy relics in the guide, but you don't necessarily need them. The only mandatory holy relics are for Freya and Freyr, as they provide the stat increases for the respective teams. So if we're looking at like the Ragnarok team, you definitely need both Freyr relic and Freya relic. And then if we're looking at like the Goddess team, you're definitely going to need Freya relic as well. And then kind of like Tarmiel and Margaret's are kind of just like, if you really need them or not, right? And then looking at the Sins Miguelda team as well, the Freyr holy relic is not actually needed there, but it definitely helps out because you would have 2 characters total, which are giving you the 10% basic stats and then the 10% damage dealt with the single target. So obviously that's going to help out as well. But yeah, no, that's just the first note I wanted to mention. And then the second note as well, guys, is that green Freya can act as a substitute for any Freya team using Goddess characters. If you're running Ragnarok teams, you cannot actually run green Freya. It's not as consistent, and there's a little bit too much cancel stance, and that's like the main problem that I think green Freya has, which we'll talk about when we actually do the floor 3 phase 2 explanation. But yeah, right now, in my opinion, the red one is actually a lot better than the green one. So you pretty much, if you have the red one, use the red one, but if you only have the green one, then you can actually use her as a substitute on the Goddess variations of the comp. So you could do like Goddess Mael team, Goddess Tarmiel team, and you're going to do really well, right? So either of those teams with the green Freya as a substitute will do really well. So those are pretty much the team guides, guys. And now let's actually move on to the artifact card set. Alright, guys, so these are the artifact card sets that you want to be using on Nidhoggr. Make sure that you get both these card sets before actually attempting to do any of these clears with these teams. So as you guys can see here, we have 2 card sets. We have the Aethirnir's Refuge and we have the Twilight Temple. So for the notes on the Aethirnir's Refuge, it is used when running any team with mixed race characters. The card set is a universal demonic beast 10% basic stat increase. So when you're running like the Ragnarok team where you have Skadi, Freya, and Red Miguelda as an example, that team, because Skadi is a giant character and the rest of them are unknown, it would technically be considered a mixed race card set. You would have to run that card set to actually benefit from the boost. So you get 10% basic stats. And then moving on to the Twilight Temple. So Twilight Temple is used when running any team with mono race characters. So the card set gives 15% attack related stats only if your team consists of characters with the same race. So if you have like Margaret, Tarmiel, Freya with her holy relic, and then Green Elizabeth, then you're going to be able to, run the attack related cards to get 15% attack related stats, as they are all of the same race. So there we go. That's pretty much the card set stuff, guys. Now let's actually move over to the gear sets and how you want to be gearing the characters in Nidhoggr. Alright guys, so hopping into the gear set section of the video, we're going to be discussing the gear sets that you actually want to make for these characters that are specific, and then the rest of the gear is just going to be your standard gear rolls as well. So for Tarmiel, guys, as you can see, Tarmiel here is running triple defense, but with a Iron Wall rune, which is a rare rune, and it has recovery rate substats on the rolls. And the reason why you want to do that is because Tarmiel is going to be the one that it mainly takes the damage on Nidhogg. He's going to be the one that's drawing damage, and he's going to be the one that needs to take it, as an example, right? So Tarmiel slot, right? And for the character that does have the Tarmiel link as well. So yeah, you run triple defense, you run recovery rate on the rune, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is going to be your standard rolls. You have your HP on your belt, let's say, and then your defense on your middle pieces, and then the attack substat rolls on the top pieces as well. So everything else is the same. And then if we move over to Freya here, Freya is actually running attack defense with the middle piece earring being resistance rolls, whereas everything else is just going to be your standard rolls. So you have, you know, your earring, which is going to be defense, you have your top pieces, which are going to be attack, and then you have your belt and your rune being HP as well. So just your standard rolls for everything else, other than the gear that I actually show here that you should roll for the separate substat. And then on the notes section of this little graphic I have here, Tarmiel gear is used on the character that runs Tarmiel Link. So if you're running red Miguelda comps, you run red Tarmiel Link, but you give the gear that Tarmiel was running onto that Miguelda. So you run the triple defense with the recovery rate bottom piece. And then, for example, if you're running red Miguelda on a Ragnarok team, she should have the same set as Tarmiel does in this graphic. So you run the exact same gear set as the red Tarmiel that I've showed you guys right here. You'd run the triple defense, and then you run the bottom right piece, the rune being on the recovery rate substat. And then on the other note as well is that Freya gear should always have resistance middle piece for only the earring, so that she has better survivability from taking damage. Yeah, having extra resistance for Freya makes it so that she tanks a lot better, especially on those like AoE phases where she starts to take a little bit more, but it's not going to be as substantial as the recovery rate roll on the bottom you know, rune piece for Tarmiel. I think that one's way more important, but you still want to have Freya's resistance piece as well. It's going to be very, very important. And then another thing to note, guys, is that all gear that isn't mentioned here for the standard is the standard sets for the respective character and standard substat rolls as well. So for example, Margaret would be HP defense because she's a support type character, and because of that, she was going to be running the basic stat substat rolls. She's going to run attack on her top pieces, defense on her middle pieces, and then HP on her substat bottom pieces as well. So hopefully these little graphic guides here were super helpful, guys. Now let's actually move on to the run itself, and we're going to talk about the actual fight and the mechanics of the fight. Alright, guys, so before we actually hop into the actual run here on Nidhoggr, I want to kind of discuss the passives real quick and kind of mention why they aren't as important on Nidhoggr versus the other demonic beast battles where they actually do matter. On Nidhoggr, the difference is that all passives that you get are only for that specific floor of the fight. So when you get a passive on floor 1 phase 3 and you get, like, let's say the increased defense related stats by 20% when surviving an ultimate move level, limit 1 time, this only is applied for floor 1 phase 3 and not at all for floor 2. So you will not have no passes going into floor 2, and you will not have no passes going into floor 3. That is why passes don't necessarily matter on Nidhoggr specifically, because if you get a passive on floor 1 that's super bad anyway and you beat the phase, then that's fine because you're already moving into floor 2 and you didn't need to actually get another passive anyway, right? You don't get another one, so it doesn't carry over. And because it doesn't carry over, a lot of these passes, no matter what you get, you should just always try to clear the phase, and if you can clear it, you clear it. But none of them necessarily are so bad that to the point where it's like, okay, if you get this passive, it's an auto reset. Like, none of the passes are as bad as that. And so I wanted to preface that before we actually go into the run, so that you guys know that passes on Nidhoggr are not as important as like other demonic beast battles. So there's that. Alright, guys, so hopping into the Nidhoggr floor 1 here, we're going to pretty much explain everything you guys need to know about the floor 1, and then also what we're going to be doing. This is the exact team comp that we're running for this example. So we're running the red Tarmiel, red Freya, red Margaret, and green Elizabeth comp. And so without the way, we're going to hop in here and explain the phases. So phase 1 for floor 1, the boss Nidhoggr is going to have an AoE skill, which actually is a cancel stance effect and a buff removal effect as well. So the AoE is a debuff skill. The single target is going to be a weak point skill that only hits single target weak points. So it's going to do triple damage against debuffed enemies. And so what's going to happen is that every phase of this, or every like turn of this phase, the boss is either going to go for the AoE skills or the single target. And, you know, best case scenario, on the second turn, you want him to do triple single target. But usually what he's going to do is he's going to do at least one AoE and then like multiple single targets. And for first turn, he always does an AoE. So as you guys can see there, after he buffed up with Tarmiel, the buff is actually instantly removed and he goes straight to attack Tarmiel. And the reason why he attacks Tarmiel is as we mentioned earlier, The recovery rate gear makes it so that Tarmiel has the least amount of HP, and the character with the least amount of HP is the one that gets targeted as a priority. So right here, I actually do merge up the Elizabeth heal card, and then we actually do waste the Freya Pierce card, because as you guys know with Freya, if you don't know already, her Holy Relic makes it so that every time you use a skill with her, you're going to be building up all stats. And so you want to actually be building up the all stats so that you're able to, you know, progressively as you're going through the fight, have more lifesteal, have more damage, have more tanking, pretty much everything that you would need. Freya is going to be providing as she's attacking. And so on the phase 2 here, phase 2, as you guys are going to see, the top left of the screen, you're going to see he has 3 damage reduction stacks. Those 3 damage reduction stacks can only be removed from stance cancel effect. And so on this team, you have both Freya single target, which is a stance cancel effect because of the Holy Relic, and then Margaret actually from the rank 1 to rank 3 is going to be a stance cancel effect as well. So you have a lot of stance cancel with this team, and so because you're able to do all the stance cancel there, you're able to reduce the amount of damage he's reducing himself, so you're able to deal more damage. And so because of that, you're able to get out this phase very quickly. As you guys can see here as well, another thing that the boss does is he's going to have extort single target and then an HP lower as well. And so you want to make sure that it's on the character that has the Tarmiel link, because if it's not on the character that has the Tarmiel link, they're going to die. And you guys saw there that Tarmiel only lived because he had the recovery rate bottom piece, and the fact that because he was getting extorted right there, he was healing it back with his Tarmiel link. Right, which is very, very important. You want to make sure that it's always the character with the Tarmiel link that is getting targeted with the extort. Because if it's any other character, they're probably going to die because they don't have any way of healing it back on the exact hit of the turn. Whereas Tarmiel is able to do that because of his link. So yeah, so Tarmiel here, he does get hit. And as you guys can see right there, he does go for an AoE, which is a block effect. The block effect AoE, he does every other turn. So the first turn, he's not going to do it. The second turn, he's going to do it. The third turn, he's not going to do it. Fourth turn, he's going to do it. So I guess every even turn, actually. You guys get what I mean. So the first turn he doesn't, second turn he does, and then, you know, you guys kind of get the gist. So every even turn he's gonna do it. So right there, we do finish off the boss, and we move into the final phase of floor 1 here. And so on the final phase of floor 1, no matter what passive we get, we don't care about the passive, guys, because passives don't necessarily matter on Nidhoggr since they don't carry over. And so now we're kind of just thinking of how are we gonna do to shred the gauge. So what I'll do is I'll actually pause the clip here, and I'll kind of explain how the gauge works on each phase, but mainly we'll talk about floor 1 phase 3 right now. So floor 1 phase 3, the way the gauge is actually shredded is by using higher ranked skills. So the higher the rank skill you use, the easier it is to shred the gauge. So as you can see here, I'm about to use the rank 2, you know, both the Freya and the Margaret card, and on floor 1, I think the rank 2 cards are able to do 45% of the gauge. So that's going to be a lot of the gauge shred, and it's pretty much going to cover 90% with just the double rank 2 right there. And then on the following turn, which is what we're going to do, is we're going to stall a turn. The following turn, we're going to be able to shred the gauge to 0 so that we're able to kill him. Before the gauge hits 0, as you guys can see from the top left, the boss does have an immortality effect, and then he also has a damage reduction effect. The moment he hits gauge 0, he loses both the damage reduction and he loses the immortality. So once you're able to shred the gauge completely, he will lower it to 0, and then you can actually kill him in the fight. So there we go. So now we can actually continue with the video here. So as you can see, I do push up the rank 2 with Elizabeth, and we do that as well. And so ripping all 3 of these rank 3s, we're going to shred the gauge all the way to 0 so that we remove the damage reduction and also the, the immortality effect, right? So right now, the Nidhoggr cannot die, and he will get lowered all the way to 0. Another thing to mention though about floor 1 is that if you put the boss lower than 30% HP, he will actually get a double attack related stat increase, which will make it so that he's just going to pretty much one-shot you. So you don't want to lower him too much on the first turn. You just want to use cards that have higher ranks so that you're able to shred the gauge. And remember guys that only attacking skills are able to shred the gauge. No buff skills on the floor 1 phase 3, only attacking skills. So it has to be an attacking ultimate or an attacking card, and that is going to be the only way you're able to shred the gauge right there. So once the gauge is 0, the gauge is not going to increase on floor 1 phase 3, so feel free to just start attacking, and if you're able to kill just like I did with Freya right there, then you shouldn't have too many issues. So there is the floor 1 guys. Now let's actually hop into the floor 2 and explain what you need to be doing on floor 2. Alright guys, so we're hopping into the floor 2 of the Nidhoggr fight here, so we can actually explain everything that you need to know for this floor 2 so that you guys are able to clear the phase and get out of the floor pretty much. So as you guys can see from the top left here, the boss does have a blue buff immortality buff, and then he also has a red debuff and then a little like plus gray buff. So don't really necessarily worry about the gray buff or the debuff that he has. Mainly you got to worry about that immortality buff that he has, and the only way you're able to remove that is with a buff removal skill. That's why every team that I showed you in the team comp section has a character at the very least that has a buff removal effect, either being like, you know, Green Elizabeth or like Scotty or like Trader Meliodas. Some character is gonna have buff removal, and you need that for this phase to be cleared, right? So without buff removal, you cannot get past floor 2, pretty much. You literally, or floor 1, I guess. You beat floor 1, you can't beat floor 2, right? Because you auto lose on this first phase because you need a buff removal. So pretty much the way this phase works though, guys, is that you want to do enough damage to put him to right where he's one shot, and then once he's one shot, you're actually able to buff remove him and then kill him and move into the next phase. If you buff remove him from the jump, he will get a bunch of damage reduction stacks, and you won't be able to kill him from like full health, let's say. So you want to make sure that he is around, you know, like the 10%, maybe 20% range, but you want to make sure that he's super low before you actually go for the kill, because if he's not super low and you just, you know, buff remove him, he's going to get a ton of damage reduction stacks, and then he's just going to kind of, you know, live the turn and then just one-shot you the following turn. I think he does also get an attack up as well. So right there where he buffed up is that extra buff makes it so that every time he has those like extra spores, he's going to just heal back the amount of damage he takes. So when you actually deal damage to the boss here, as you guys will see when I attack, so I do the Elizabeth ultimate first and then we get the attack related up. But you guys will see here as I do these attacks that when we, or no, I guess I reset here, but the moment you guys will see when we do the attacks here, you'll see that the damage that we're dealing, and then when we're, you know, buff removing, you will see that the boss actually does heal back a little bit of HP. So you'll see here, so we do the Margaret buff card. We follow up with the Elizabeth gauge fill ultimate as well. So we're gonna do that, and then when we do the target, the attack card with Margaret, look at the boss's HP after the card ends. So right there. So look, you see how he healed up a little bit? That's because of that blue buff that he has with the little plus on it. Pretty much the same as the gray debuff that he has, right? Or the gray buff. So yeah, you pretty much always want to make sure you finish these phases, guys, full health, so that when you move into the following phases, Tarmiel is always the one that gets attacked. If you finish a phase and you're not full health, that is another thing that will happen, is that your other characters might get targeted, and that's why you want to make sure that you finish the phase with full health, so that Tarmiel is the only one that gets targeted, especially going into like phase 2, floor 2, because that's going to be pretty important right there. But yeah, as you guys can see, the boss puts up a stance effect. The stance effect, all it does is that it actually will stun you, I think, if you have 3 corrosion debuffs on you. So if you attack into him and you have a 3 of the debuffs, then you will actually get stunned. So you don't want to have that. Pretty much you want to make sure you're in a range where you're not going to get that if you are attacking. And then so right there, guys, we do the Elizabeth buff removal at the very end to finish off the phase and move into phase 2 floor 2. So phase 2 floor 2 is going to be a little bit different. A long time ago it used to be a lot more difficult, but now they actually changed it a little bit. So the way phase 2 floor 2 works is that he has the exact same damage reduction stacks as he had on the first floor, but the difference is that every time you stance remove him, you will get infected. So if you're trying to use a healing ability after you use a cancel stance, it's not going to work. So if you do like an Elizabeth heal card, that's not going to work. If you do an Elizabeth ultimate, it's not going to work. The only thing that can override it would be a buff cleanse effect. So if you have a character like Margaret, or if you have Red Miguelda, those characters can do these buff cards to actually cleanse the debuff and then be able to heal up the team as well. So both of those characters are able to do that, right? And so as you can see, the boss is attacking. He does have a dissolve and a alt lock card, and then he also does have a defense related lower card, but nothing too important here that you need to really worry about. So right here, as you guys can see, we do the attack up with Tarmiel, and then we start doing the single target, and you will see here after we do this cancel stance that the entire team gets a red debuff infect for the turn. So right there. So once the turn ends though, the red debuff infect will actually disappear. So you guys see right there, it disappears, and we do actually move into the next phase because Freya ultimate is just broken as hell. So look at that. We're kind of speed running through this. So hopefully you guys are still getting the explanation and you kind of understand though. But now we're on to the floor 3. I'm actually going to pause floor 3 because I feel like there's a lot to explain here that I want to cover. So floor 3 phase, or phase 3, I mean, my bad. Phase 3 floor 2. Phase 3 floor 2, he's gonna get a damage reduction buff every single turn, guys. And as you can see, he starts with a blue damage reduction buff, and his full health, he does also have immortality, and he has a recovery rate and regeneration rate buff as well. So the way that Nidhoggr works on this phase 3 of floor 2 is that you have to put him less than 50% HP every single turn no matter what. If he is higher than 50% HP, he will get an attack related stat increase, and that attack related stat increase will make it so that he's able to one-shot your team. So you want to make sure that going into this phase you have a ton of damaging skills, either being like a Freya ultimate or like Freya attack cards. As you can see in my hand, I have multiple Freya attack cards, so I'm able to actually dish out a ton of damage. But on a phase like this, you want to make sure that you're able to put him less than 50% so that you don't let him have the attack related stat up. And every time you put him less than 50%, guys, the boss will actually shred 33% of the gauge, going down every single turn. So that you have to do, at the very least, this phase is going to be 4 turns long, because it's going to be the initial turn, and then it's going to be the 3 turns down, and then on the turn you actually kill him. So that's pretty much that. So yeah, pretty much the way I explain it is that every turn he's going to get the damage reduction, the gauge shreds by 33% every time he's less than 50% HP, and when he's less than 50% HP, he doesn't actually get an attack related stat increase. So there we go, I've pretty much explained the fight. Now let's actually watch what I do in the actual run, and to show you guys what you want to be doing. So we'll play it out here, and we'll see what we do. So another thing as well is that he auto applies corrosion, so you guys see that on the entire team there, we do have a full, everybody had corrosion right there, nothing we can really do, but we do cleanse it, right? So right here we do the double single target here, and Freya's just going to be hitting so hard on the team like this because Margaret and Tarmiel have built up so much basic stats and just damage dealt in general that we really don't have too many issues in dealing a ton of damage and putting him less than the 50%, right? So every time he's less than 50% as well, guys, he will get a HP related stat increase so that he's able to life steal a lot better. So when he gets that HP related stat, he is going to life steal a little bit more, and it's going to be a lot harder to kill him. So he's going to be also, because he's a lot more tanky too, right? So he gets HP related, and then he also gets the damage reduction every turn. So as you can see there, we don't have a buff removal effect from Elizabeth, so we're just going to have to dish out damage here. And because we have Freya ultimate at 6 out of 6, which 6 out of 6 is not necessary, you don't need dupes on Freya to be able to do this, but obviously this is like a convenience thing. When you ult with Freya and she's dealing that much damage, the amount of abyss damage kind of counteracts the amount of recovery that the boss will get every time he gets lowered, because he's going to start healing it back a little bit, right? But right there we do top deck a buff removal so that we're able to actually remove those 3 damage reduction stacks, because with those 3 damage reduction stacks, it's going to be very hard to actually kill this boss and dish out enough damage, right? So right there we do take another AoE skill, and so right here with Tarmiel, he's going to actually be able to put him to pretty much 0% HP, and I'm not necessarily worried about the range of HP that he's at. And so what I can do here is I can waste both Elizabeth cards to actually push up the Elizabeth ultimate, because we want to actually finish the fight, guys, with full HP. Remember, we're moving into the next phase, right? So we want to make sure to, put him to the 0%, use the Elizabeth heal card. The corrosion's going to do its thing, but that's going to be fine, because the following turn here, as long as we live these multiple hits, we'll be able to finish off the fight and move on to the final floor as well. So right here, the boss is going to do his ultimate. His ultimate on this phase is going to be Explosion, so you want to make sure you have a cleanse as well. And then right there, that attack where he chomps on all your characters is where he's going to D-rank all your skills. So bear in mind that he will have D-rank, but it's not going to be as important as long as you are making sure that when you're going into a phase like that, you don't have multiple rank 2s, so that you don't get your ultimate taken from you, right? But right there, we do double Freya single target, and as you guys can see, 624k, hitting the double damage cap on the boss and finishing off this floor 2 so that we can move into the floor 3. So there you guys go, man. That is going to be the floor 2 of Nidhoggr. Let's move into the floor 3. Alright guys, we are moving into the floor 3 of Nidhoggr now. Let's actually cover all the mechanics so that you guys know what you're doing when doing floor 3. So on the first floor here, guys, the way the boss is going to work is that every 3rd turn, a card is going to get sealed. So that is the most important thing that you need to know. Going into the phase though, if you have a team like this, you're not necessarily going to have to worry about that stipulation, because you're going to be able to kill within the 3 turns on this first phase. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you stack up your Freya. And another thing that you guys will see is that the boss has gauge on each phase of floor 3. So the gauge on this phase, I'll explain it once it actually goes up so you guys can get an idea, but it'll go up every single time, and once it actually goes up, he will have the immortality buff effect, and then it's going to be a lot harder to kill him unless you have him at 0. And so the way you actually shred the gauge is that by using Pierce cards. So higher rank Pierce cards will shred the gauge. Ultimates will do 33% as well, and then you will be able to do it with higher ranking skills as well. So it's kind of like floor 1 phase 3 in a way, but also has the mechanics of being able to do like 33% with the ultimates and stuff like that. So it's going to be fairly decent to actually shred the gauge. But right there, we're just wasting a bunch of skills right there, and we're just trying to make sure that when we actually go for the kill here on this floor 1, that we make sure everybody's full HP going into floor 2, because we want Tarmiel to be the one that gets attacked. It's the exact same scenario as the other one we were doing as well. So right here, guys, he's gonna do a buff up right here, and that buff makes it so that one of his skills actually does more damage. I think one of them scales off of having a stance, and then one has basic scaling off attack. So both of them have a scale off attack, but I mean one does more damage with a stance pretty much. It's like Quell. I think one of them is like Quell AoE, and then the other is like AoE, the higher attack, the more damage you deal, right? So right there, as you guys will see here, when I do this buff card with Margaret, you'll see that the buff actually gets sealed. So when I mentioned at the beginning of the fight, when you do a buff card, boom, it gets sealed. So buff disable. So any type of skill that you use will get sealed. So if you're running a character like Mael and you have like his debuff attack, that's the one that actually gets lowered as well, and that's another one you can do, right? So you could do like that, and then you can still use your attacking skills. But if you use an attack skill, guys, you will get attack sealed, and that's going to be a little bit of an issue, right? So right here, I was kind of just checking Elizabeth's HP just to make sure that she had higher than Tarmiel, but she actually didn't have higher than Tarmiel, so I had to actually stall an extra turn here, right? Because we want to make sure that we're going into the final, or into the next phase with full HP. So I was like, okay, let's get an Elizabeth ultimate. Let's make sure that we get that at the very least, and then when doing that, we'll be able to next turn just kind of triple ultimate. And because, as I told you guys, the ultimates do 33% of the gauge, we can pretty much do 3 cards and then follow-up attack, or you could do 3 ultimates that have one of them being Freya ultimate, and that's gonna actually shred the gauge all the way to 0, and the Abyss will actually kill him on 0, right? So that's what you can do as well. It's a little bit of tech you can do if you have the what's it called, if you have Freya ultimate. And it doesn't matter what dupe, by the way, on Freya ultimate, because the boss will be at 1 HP, right? So it actually doesn't matter. So yeah, and then I don't know if I mentioned this already, guys, but every other turn after the first turn where you get sealed is where you're gonna lose the debuff seal that you just had, but you're gonna get resealed. But right here, because I only use ultimates cannot be sealed by Nidhoggr. So if you use ultimates, feel free to just continue using them, unless you use like an attack seal. That would be the one that gets sealed, right? So right there, we put him to 0. We do the healing ultimate, we gauge fill as well, and because of a Freya Abyss, we're actually gonna kill the phase and move into phase 2. So phase 2 here of Nidhoggr on floor 3 is gonna be very, very there's a lot of stuff going on. So I'm actually gonna pause it and I'm gonna explain what kind of happens with this fight. So I'm gonna pause it right here and we're gonna kind of explain. So off the rip here, he starts at 0%. Every time the boss is at 0% on this phase, he will get a damage dealt buff. So as you guys can see on the top left, he has a damage dealt buff. When I actually remove that damage dealt, he will increase his gauge, but he won't be at 0 and he'll lose it, right? So that's pretty much the way that works. The same thing applies as where stance cancel effects will reduce the amount of damage reduction, but the way stance cancel works on this phase is that it actually increases his gauge. So you don't want to be spamming too many stance cancels, because of the fact that, when you do it, it actually increases his gauge. So running a character like Green Freya here, and I want to mention this here, is that when you run Green Freya, the problem that a lot of people have with Green Freya here is that you have to use, literally both her cards are stance removals, right? Because of her Holy Relic giving single target stance removal. That's why Red Freya is a lot better, because she has a lot of leeway with having a other skill that doesn't do a stance cancel. And another reason why that's so important as well is because the way the boss works as well is that the character that does not attack gets applied with a darkness stack. So the character that does not attack will get a darkness stack, and the boss has covert action as one of his attacking skills. So if he's able to get that off, that's going to be really, really dangerous, because with that, he's going to just pretty much one-shot you and you might die, right? So that's going to be a little bit scary. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, guys, let's actually continue right here, and we'll kind of explain the rest of the phase here. So off the rip, he's going to have the damage dealt, but because we do the stance removal, we're actually able to remove it, and then we're going to be able to start shredding the gauge. Another thing that I forgot to mention as well is that every time you do a stance removal, though, the boss will get a buff that will benefit you. So when I stance cancel here with Margaret, as you guys can see, the boss's damage deal gets removed, and he actually does get a buff right there, which is a recovery rate, or not a recovery rate, it's a recovery skill buff for you. So whenever you use recovery skills, it's actually going to shred the gauge a lot quicker. And so every time you use a stance cancel, you're going to get a buff in that manner where it's going to benefit you, but it's going to increase his gauge even higher. So it's kind of a trade-off. It's like, do you increase his gauge or do you get more buffs, right? It's kind of, you have to kind of balance that out. So right there, as you guys saw as well, is that my Elizabeth did get a darkness stack. So if we attack with her this turn, she actually will not get a darkness stack. And because we're attacking with everybody, we're not going to get an extra darkness this turn. So we do the ultimate with Freya. It's going to do a good chunk of damage. And then we're able to kind of get him a little bit lower near the 0% right there. So right here, the boss is going to attack, double attack into Tarmiel because he was the one that is the lowest HP. Remember, he's always going to attack. He does have a buff removal effect as well. And on his ultimate too, guys, he does have an effect where he actually does apply extort on you. And that is probably the scariest part when running a team like the Margaret team. Because if you don't have a cleanse on that turn where he does the extort, you might get cooked the following turn, which could be a little bit dangerous, right? You want to make sure you have at least one type of, way to remove it, right? And if you have a buff removal with Liz, that's another way you can do it too, because since it's a buff for the boss, you are actually able to remove it in that manner. And that's going to be a good way to do it, right? Right there, the boss actually does the remove on Freya right there, and then goes for the ultimate, which is going to be the extort. The follow-up attack off the extort here, guys, is going to do a ton of damage here. So as you guys will see, boom, a lot of damage on Tarmiel right there. So you want to make sure that this turn right here, you're able to cleanse it and remove it instantly, right? Because we don't want to have that issue where he just has that instantly and just finishes us off. And so right here, we're actually going to put the gauge to 0, and it's going to remove the immortality buff. And so as we do the attacks here to finish off the boss, we're gonna move into the next phase because we're able to put him to 0 and then finish off the phase in that manner. So here we go, guys. So now we're moving into the phase 3, floor 3 of Nidhoggr. Let's explain the mechanics here. So I'm gonna actually pause the video and we'll explain the mechanics again as well. So the way floor 3 actually does work is that the boss is gonna have 5 of those little like star gray buffs. Right, so 5-star gray buffs are going to be how long or how many turns before he gets a all stats increase. So each of those buffs, they don't do anything for the boss necessarily, but when he has those buffs, every turn that ends, he will lose one. So after 5 turns, he's going to get all stats 30% increase. And so preferably you want to kill him within those 5 turns. And so the way you actually do it by shredding the gauge is by putting him less than 30% to shred 25% of the gauge. The way the boss actually works normally is that if you lower him less than 10% out of 90%, so let's say you get him to like 90% HP, you only do 10% on the bar, it is going to shred the gauge a very minuscule amount, but you want to shred it really, really quickly before he gets to all stats so that you're able to kill the boss as quick as possible. So what I do on this floor right here, so we'll let the video play. So what I like to do is I just start to like do a ton of damage and kind of push up ultimates, right? We want to just dish out as much damage as possible so that the boss is lowered to as low HP as we can. So when we're shredding the gauge, it's going to be 25% every turn so that he has one more when he's on 0, right? That's pretty much the way you want to do it. So when Freya is doing a million on her single targets right there, it is very, very easy to actually put the guy less than 30% to actually shred the gauge by 25% every single turn. So right there, and then what he's going to do as well is he's going to have a stance effect. So when we get to that, we'll kind of explain it. But the stance effect is going to have reflect on it. So you want to make sure you have a stance removal when he does put up that stance effect. And then he's also going to have the D rank skill that the floor 2 of phase 3 one had as well. So he's going to do the D rank. So whenever you see that dark red card that he has right there, so I think that is D rank. He is actually going to go for that and D rank the cards. But luckily we do not have a D rank at all really on us. So we're pretty much good. So right there, actually do the Freya ultimate because I know that's going to put him to 30. Look how much damage that did. That's 6 out of 6 to be fair, but that's a lot of damage because we had the attack with Tarmiel, and then the fact that Margaret just has so much basic stat increase for Freya right there. And as you guys saw, look at the amount of damage my Abyss did. It put him less than 30 anyways. So I actually don't even have to damage him this turn if I didn't want to, and he will stay at that range of HP so that when I actually I can just kind of like stall for like heals here or whatever the case, and I wouldn't have to really worry about it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to gauge fill. I'm going to do the attack related buff up as well, because we're going to cleanse with the Margaret rank 2, and then we actually do just waste the Tarmiel attack up or the Tarmiel attack card, and it's just going to put him to pretty much 0% HP, but he's going to heal that back up. Remember guys, because he has that little recovery buff and he's not at 0%, he's always going to be able to heal that back up. So you just want to make sure you always every single turn put him to that 30% HP. If it's a little bit hard to do, it's okay, but once he gets to that all stat phase, man, that's when he's really going to cook you. So it's going to be a lot harder to live on a phase like that versus a phase where you pretty much shouldn't have too many issues and go about the fight. So right here, he does have the stance, and so that's where we do have the stance removal with Margaret right there. So we're gonna do the attack up, we do the stance removal, and the Abyss always kept him at this range of HP, which is really good. Obviously, me following up with an ultimate would have probably put him at that range anyway, but always making sure that you do that is gonna be really, really beneficial. And a turn like this as well, I got a little bit unlucky too, because we don't have a cleanse here. So having a cleanse right there would have been really nice, because we have so many ignites now, because the boss does ignite on the ultimate, we're gonna take a lot of damage here, guys. So this is a little bit scary here, as he's gonna dish out damage. But you guys see here, the gauge hits 0. He loses the immortality buff, and he loses the recovery rate buffs as well. So he's not gonna start healing a ton as well, which is very, very good. So right here, he's going to do these single targets, but Tarmiel is super tanky. We are going to tank this turn really well, even with all those ignites, and we're going to live. And so now we can actually finish off the boss here with the Freya attack cards, and then the Margaret ultimate, and follow up with the Tarmiel attack card as well. And that's going to be the floor 3 of the Nidhoggr run right there, guys. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, man. That is pretty much the video. You know, we pretty much explained everything for the fight, all the mechanics, and you guys saw a demo run here as well, to kind of see how you're able to go about the fight. So again, guys, I hope this video is helpful. Definitely make sure to like and subscribe on the video. It did take a lot of effort to make this video, a lot of time, a lot of editing. So definitely make sure to like and subscribe. And I hope you guys do enjoy the video, and we'll see you guys on the next one, man. Peace out. Have a great rest of your day, guys.